It's 1970, is it? It's in colour. It's not Crackerjack. It's not Friday. It's Jon Pertwee. So this is the new Doctor Who, starting of the new decade, and it's all rather a bit like going to be happening very soon in November, where RTD takes over. But now we have a brand new era of Doctor Who in 1970, starting with Spearhead. I always end up saying Spearmint from space, which is very different. It's very Quatermass. It's very. What do you think?
I mean, it's interesting you say Quatermass, because I get a whole Quatermass vibe from this whole season as a whole, which is not a bad thing, I have to say. But yeah, I mean, let's look. You can tick off the first, can't we, for Spearhead from space? And you say, we're in colour. We've got a new companion who, she's more of the Doctor's equal than ever before. Even more so than Zoe with her space knowledge. We've got a film episode, because Spearhead from Space is, very much filmetic, and we're into this whole unit Avengers kind of era. And it's strange, isn't it? We're moving into the 70s, and there's really the tropes of the 60s we're seeing here to some degree.
I mean, the invasion was a bit of a prototype for what we're seeing, particularly when the Autons attack and there's all guns and explosions. I keep thinking Patrick Troughton's going to run and suddenly go, oh dear, oh golly gosh.
But that's it. This Doctor's very different. I think, much as I love Pat as the second Doctor, he's not quite as much a departure from Hartnell as the kind of the bumbling eccentric scientist. And then you got Pertwee, who we've still got the scientist elements, but he's a man of action. He's a Time Lord of action.
He doesn't get out of bed till episode 2, but he's got that. It's interesting. He is playing himself. And I remember reading in a fanzine somewhere where people were claiming that some Doctors were better than others. I mean, do people ever do that? And there were some reviews saying that some Doctors are playing themselves. Tom Baker, Jon Pertwee. I'm trying to think, there was another one as well. But others are putting on an act. So Peter Davison isn't normally like that. Colin Baker's normally quite nice. He doesn't shout as much as all that.
Or strangle people.
As far as I know, yes. So Spearhead from Space, I noticed another thing as well, is that we took a little while to get to meeting the Doctor. We joined.
I mean, isn't it? I mean, I can't help but compare this to future episodes and think about like the Christmas Invasion with Tennant's first story. Exactly the same. He's in bed. He's comatose. Everything's happening without the Doctor for a large portion of the story, certainly initially, and we get the Doctor finally kicking into gear after a while.
What I like really is that there are several. Well, there's 2 stories going on as you follow it through the early episodes. So you are following this really sort of strange invasion that's happening in a toy factory with this guy who's quite clearly being controlled by somebody else, which sort of hypnotizing. Now, it's not the Master, but it does remind me of the War Games where where someone's being hypnotized to do things, which saves on budget, because this doesn't have any monsters till the last episode, which is a bit of a silly tentacle monster.
It's a bit of a Pertwee trope, but the whole sort of military industrial complex, man from the Ministry vibe is something we get again throughout all this season and throughout a lot of Pertwee's other seasons as well. Certainly all the ones where units are quite heavily involved. So the idea is, this is dealing with business. And it's a business that's doing things behind our back that are shady with these plastic creatures they're creating. And I've got to confess here, Elliot, I adore the Autons. They're one of my favourite classic villains. And I think, even in this story, they're quite threatening. They're great when they come back in the next season, even more so. I mean, the street attacks on London in Terror of the Autons are great. But I like them in this because they're kind of this implacable monster with the way they're seeking out the meteors, the way they assassinate that guy in the tent.
I'm just saying, I just said there was 2 stories. I'm wrong, because you've got the story of who is this mysterious person in the hospital. You've got the factory, and also you've got the farmer, or it's not a farmer, he's a
poacher.
There's him. So you're setting up loads of different things, and they're all going to interconnect. So
it's a more complex storytelling narrative, isn't it? It's no longer the Doctor or the companions fall over, and then 3 episodes later something might happen. We've got storylines. It's more sophisticated. It's, dare I say it, more adult.
Oh, it is. It definitely feels to me like I had this on VHS and it was a you. How on earth was this for you? You know, the bit where one of these people is driving along with the glowing cube things,
Mm.
and the car crashes and the camera spins round. And then as you see the Auton go and grab it, there's broken glass and you can see blood where the Union soldier. It's a kid show, everybody.
Yeah, people die in these episodes. It's not a case of, oh no, there's a bit of a monster and the doctor's sorted, everything's happy. People still die as a result of the action of these creatures.
One of the creepiest bits for me is when the poacher's wife, who has a name but I can't think, she goes back to her house and there's somebody who isn't her husband in the house, and she's like, "Who are you?" And she's really scared, and then turns around and it's this faceless thing. That's what's creepy about them. And when they reappeared in 2005, they didn't look very creepy. They just looked like mannequins. But I don't think
I still like them when they came back in Rose.
They were good, but they weren't as creepy as they are with Spearhead from Express for me. Because did mannequins look that freaky in 1970? Because if they did, I wouldn't buy any clothes. I'm an activist now.
Oh, I don't know, because 1970 predates both you and me, Al. So we, I mean, because this is the thing about this season that always strikes me is I read all of these and the Target adaptations long before I saw the episodes.
Yeah.
So I always know my appreciation of this season is always coloured to a little degree by perhaps the expansion of some of the characters, right? You know, it's not just random unit soldier who dies, it's someone who's got a little more backstory in the narrative because of the book is longer than these episodes.
I remember one of the most embarrassing moments for it was when I was watching it for the first ever time on VHS whenever it came out, late 80s. And I've been really enjoying the series. This is Jon Pertwee. I think I'd seen Death of the Daleks at that point, but this was the introduction to the debut of Pertwee, and it was brilliant. And it'd been creepy all the way through, and I've been in this room with my brother watching it, and my dad decided to walk in at the moment that we meet the Auton creature, and the bit where the tentacles are going around Jon Pertwee's face, and he pulls these silly noises. It's like a Peter Sellers thing. It's slightly let down, not by the monster, making some weird noises. It's where he's going,
yeah,
a bit silly.
Shouldn't have ordered the calamari.
It does, and there's a bit where he's sort of standing in front of the machine, and it's a bit like Panto going, "Where? Behind me? Behind me?" And he suddenly gets grabbed by it, and they just needed to retake it, and it would have been scary. There is a scary bit afterwards. Channing, that's his name, isn't it?
Channing, yeah.
He's like the conduit.
He is. If anything, maybe he is the Spearhead itself because he is the leader or the leader entity.
Yeah, but at the end, when he disintegrates, he's just a dummy like anybody else, and that's really creepy.
Is that a commentary on business that, let's face it, any manager is always a faceless entity, and they're always replaceable?
I mean, it is absolutely stunning. I think it's such an amazing debut. You know, I mean, we're not really talking about Jon Pertwee and the fact that he absolutely is charming and funny and communicates with his eyebrows. And all
I mean, he certainly inhabits the character of the Doctor very rapidly. You know, and it's very much, you can see the kind of Doctor he's going to be. The fact that he's regenerated with his navel tattoo is great. I always like that bit in the shower where you can see his anchor tattoo. That's great.
Jon Pertwee is obviously, before this, well known as a comedy actor in Navy, lots of other things like that. And it does seem that they keep giving him these little funny bits because, well, he does comedy, doesn't he? So there's a book where he's putting his different costumes on, the hat doesn't fit, he's in the nude in the shower. And then they don't do this to him in any of the other stories.
No.
He's great, he can do drama. We don't need in funny bits.
But you see, it is, as I say, I think the whole story of Spearhead from Space, you know, the Autons, all the rest of it off to one side, you know, this is absolutely introducing not just a new Doctor, but very much a new era of Doctor Who, a second era of Doctor Who, away from the studio-bound, or totally studio-bound episodes of the first and the second Doctor we had so much of, and actually location.
Yeah, well, we're on Earth now. That is the really fascinating thing.
Yes, so it's much cheaper. We've got locations everywhere.
It's very sneaky. It's quite clever. Because, as we'll notice in the next episode, which is Doctor Who and the Silurians, and it's literally called Doctor Who and the Silurians for reasons that are never explained. It's appear on the screen. I remember seeing it on VHS.
I know, it's very weird, isn't it? So
Yeah.
are we going to rate Spearhead then?
Well, you see, I have difficulty with it because straight away there's nothing I don't like about it. I mean, maybe it's the tentacle bit at the end, but that's just an embarrassing moment for me. I give it like a 10 out of 10. For me, it's an absolute solid 8. I mean, there are a few bits that perhaps don't work as well, but I love it. Great rewatchability. It's one of my favourite Pertwee era stories. So yeah, solid 8. I feel like I'm being over generous then, but I just have such good memories.
You can be over generous and I can be overly mean. So it's an average of 9, but for the two of us, that seems perfectly fine to me.
And it's scary. That's that thing, which we'll have to see whether Doctor Who go back to.
It's also, and this is one last thing I should say before we move on to Doctor Who and the Silurians. It's a relatively compact 4 episodes, and compare that to the rest of the season, as we'll discuss.
That is the odd thing. So we've got Doctor Who and the Silurians, then we've got the Ambassadors of Death, and then we've got Inferno. And they are, if I'm correct, all have 7 episodes each.
Yeah.
And it seems that's why I disassociate Spearhead for Space a lot of the time, and I forget that it's connected to these two because, as you say, it's compact. It's 4 episodes. There you go. Each one's slightly different. Where are we going with this? Then we get to this point where they're telling broader or slower tales, which I like. So we've now Doctor Who and the Silurians, which does feature a very brief cameo of Paul Darrow from Blake 7, and that's that is one of the selling points because he's barely in it, but you go, oh, it's him. But what I can remember about Doctor Who and the Silurians was I think they repeated it back in the 90s, and that must have been 7 weeks that I set my video to record that because it's 7 episodes. My goodness, 7? Is it really 7?
7 long episodes, and I've got to confess, for me that is one of the down points of the Silurians, is it does go on a bit too long. If you'd pared it down to 5 episodes even, I think you would have a tight, taut, and quite prescient thriller of a species that's trying to pre-existed before man, that is now coming back and he's faced by an existential crisis that, well, do we replace the monkeys that have succeeded after us? Do we wipe them out? And you have them actually have factions within themselves. It's not like Silurians is, we're all of one mind. No, you've got those who can actually see the coexistence could work, and those who go, no, we must dominate, we must destroy them with our bioplague. And it gives them a sophistication that I think a lot of bad guys lack in Doctor Who, or certainly had done up until this point.
Well, they brought back the Silurians, didn't they, for the modern era, and they made them slightly different. I think they slightly, when they made one of them as part of that Victorian fun gang with the girlfriend and
the Paternoster gang.
I was never sure how to pronounce that. I liked that; that was fun. But when I went back,
I did. I loved Madame Bastard, Jenny, and Strax.
When I went back to Silurians, I forgot that they are quite harsh and they are aliens, and as you say. But I think
they're time. I mean, they are time aliens is the best way to describe them, because they are aliens to the modern age. They are, arguably, the native Earth creatures.
Yeah.
We are the Johnny-come-latelys who have taken over the planet after them.
The interlopers, or some sort of combination between antelope and ape, which I haven't worked out yet, to be honest.
Antelopers.
Yes, we're those. And what is great though, the characters are really good. You've got that guy from Porridge who is in it. And he's a professor, and he's up to no good. And you've got also, which we'll see a lot in Doctor Who of the Pertwee era, is we've got, particularly this season, we've got a huge sort of science laboratory thing, like a set with a thing that spins around, and people in little white coats running around emergencies. We will see a lot of that in the next so many stories. But what you've also got is you've got Pertwee, again, absolutely. Caroline John, is that right? Yes.
Caroline John, Liz Shaw.
She's brilliant in this.
Do we have to postulate, by the way, that is Liz Shaw related to Tim Shaw, following our discussions of last time?
Oh, from yeah. Let's go for yes. She's an alien. I met her when I was working at a toy shop, and she and I said, "Oh, Liz Shaw," and she went, "Oh, you're far too young to remember who I am." And then I said, "What are you doing today?" I don't mean to shut up. Like, what are you doing today? was recording the commentary for Inferno, and she said, I'll sign you a copy and I'll bring it in next time I'm in. But the thing is, I wasn't in the next day, so maybe she was wandering around a toy shop with
Oh
the DVD
no!
to find me, but I wasn't in. But I don't know. But what is amazing about this particular one, I can remember, is that we get into. I could be wrong. We get introduced to the Silurian, one Silurian at a time. So we have those lovely point of view shots that are really scary with the breathing. We have that bit where Jon Pertwee goes to the guy from Porridge's house and goes, "Oh, it's awfully warm in here, isn't it? It's like a greenhouse." Like, he does that really subtle sort of thing. And then they kill him, the Silurian, to cover their tracks. And you're suddenly, as much as we know where the ending is going, where that is such a really good ending, where the Brigadier makes that choice.
Oh, it's good because it stamps on it that the Doctor, in some regards, is a bit out of his depth now. That before he would have solved everything would be fine, and no, military's just blown them up. It's a very 70s sci-fi ending. Bleak.
Yeah. I mean, that is that thing, isn't it? You've got this. You mentioned it's more sophisticated. It's more mature. I'm trying to think. It feels less like, not calling the black and white era B movie, but the last sort of series of Patrick Troughton with the Dominators and other similar ones that's in the Crotons. They were quite cliched sci-fi, and here we have modern sci-fi. We were mentioning Quatermass, of course. That was 20 years before.
I know.
So you've got this thing where maybe it was being a bit retro. People were tuning in and going, "Oh, I do like a bit of Quatermass. Oh, that's what Doctor Who's doing now." Be interesting to see when Doctor Who returns with RTD in November, whether he'll do "Let me make it like it was 20 years ago." So maybe it'll be 2000 and, well, technically, not quite 20 years ago, but maybe it'll feel like we're watching 2005 television, or are we going to be watching 2023 television? Because when you the Silurians, what also we didn't mention is the fact that the TARDIS is not even used.
Oh yes, but yeah. Well, because
it doesn't go anywhere. It's broken. He's always tinkering with it.
Yeah, so it's that is a quite rarity, isn't it? Even for Pertwee's era, no mention of the TARDIS, no use of the TARDIS, not even appearance. Yeah. It's not really in the lab as of yet, which we get very regularly in the Unit era. But
it's a bit like when they did the Daniel Craig James Bonds and said, "We won't have the music, we won't have the tuxedo, we were." That shouldn't be. We won't have the theme music to.
The revisionist approach to Bond, yeah.
Yeah, because that if it's a bit like a comedian coming on and doing the catchphrases first. Where do you go from that once you've done that?
I have to say, I think of all of the stories, this is the one you could have replaced the Doctor with Professor Quatermass and told the same story.
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
And and I think that's a positive for it. But I think, like I say, the length is just too much. Yeah. I think the Silurian costumes are a bit of the rubber monster department for me.
They move around and go. What's one of their lines? I can't remember.
It's the fact they have. We have to have a light on the head like the Daleks to indicate who's talking because it's such a big prosthetic. And that, I mean, Jon Pertwee, I know himself, has always said he preferred the Draconians because you could see their chin moving, and he says that's the mark of a good monster. Is you can get the interaction. You can't play to something that's a full face mask.
Well, I mean that's the skill of actors. I remember like the same year that I think one of the Lord of the Rings movies came out, which didn't get awards till the third one. Because that's the same era of Attack of the Clones, where there are a lot of people acting to green screen. And they're acting to green screen in a Lord of the Rings movie, but they're acting better. You really believe.
Possibly it's better scripting as well.
That too. But you have that thing where going, with all, Jon Pertwee, he's managing to play up against a rubber creature.
Yeah. But then that's the remit of the Doctor, is you're going to be, whether you're acting to a green screen or some poor mook from RADA who's just doing it for the pay today. I am Tremendous, the evil one. And
you've seen that bit in Toast. I've started watching a bit of Toast and Matt Berry, and the point where he didn't want to do Doctor Who because the last time he did it, he got one line. He go, yes, or he just says one word. And I do feel sorry for the Silurian. There's that point where one of the Silurians kills the other one and goes, I don't want to do your plan, and just sort of headlights him into death.
Yeah,
I think it's quite harsh.
Yeah, but that's what I say. And I like the fact there was factionalization within the Silurians themselves. It
Yeah.
made them more real as a species. It made
Yeah.
them, they were still an implacable threat, but they
Mm.
were not sort of a unified group of, hello, we're the aliens, we're the bad guys are us.
Yeah, and of course you've got units, really load of unit in this. Brigadier goes into tunnels. They the whole thing. There's that one guy who I don't know. He's outside unit, and there's two people that don't like the Doctor, and there's one that he thinks that the Doctor's betrayed everybody and everything, and runs, and he's going to jump. Who gets to go? You are ill. You're very ill, and point at him. Really cool bit. And the other one is the guy who will play Nida. Is that right? He's going to be in Genesis of the Daleks in a few years' time. And am I getting the story right? And he's all covered in plague. And he goes, I am not ill. Is this the same story I'm talking about here? See, I'm getting muddled up now.
Oh, I don't know if you are or not, but sounds good.
Yeah. Well, because that's the problem I have with these long stories is after a while, I get the actors probably have the same thing going.
I know. I mean, as I said about the man from the ministry thing, and it is absolutely written in this one. There's the governmental interference going on throughout here, and while that's an interesting trope, again, of how the military is dealing with the government's dealing with the military and everything, it does become a bit recurrent throughout the Pertwee era. Maybe at this point it's still fresh. But obviously, by the time I watched it, it wasn't fresh because I'd seen other bits of Pertwee and where this has occurred.
I think we've mentioned everything we can. I'm trying to think. I like that. I like the scary the T-Rex that shows up. It's quite good. I like it. It's I like that. Yes, it's very long, but it isn't just the same thing. It's slowly building up the mystery, possibly too slowly. But it's still doing.
And I have to say, like I say, I mean, for me, it's why I would give it. It's a worthy 7.
Yeah, same here.
If it was shorter, it would be much higher. There's a rich vein of story. There's some well thought out, nuanced characters, and certainly antagonists for the Silurians. Worth them bringing them back. I have issues about the Sea Devils. We could always talk about another episode, but 7. I think 7 seems fair.
Because I'm thinking as I go, like, it's the bloke from the guy from Tomorrow Never Dies, and the one who's the military guy from Reggie Perrin. He's in this, isn't he?
Oh, Jeffrey Palmer, yeah.
So it is that.
Yeah, Jeff Palmer's in this. Yeah, he's Masters. Yeah.
It's a bit weird. I forgot to mention it.
Not the Master.
Not them.
Just Masters. Yeah.
I've got that bit where people start dying of the Silurian plague. And it's very realistic. They have this shot in the train station and people falling over. And I remember watching this accidentally during the COVID times and going, maybe I'll watch something else. Because it has a harshness, a harsh, sophisticated, does not feel, despite the rubber monsters and sometimes, giant dinosaurs, I guess, it doesn't feel like a kid's program. You've really sort of made it more adult.
Which, is a perfect segue into the Ambassadors of Death.
Yeah.
Because this, for me, feels like a swing absolutely into the realms of sci-fi horror.
Yeah.
The title alone, it's, of death.
They around with the captions. If you watch it, it goes, the ambassadors of, pause, death. Suddenly.
Death. Yeah.
Well, you did messing with it.
Yeah, we are trying to make it. I mean, do you know, of all the stories this season, this is the one that I felt in a later series would have had the Master in them. Now, maybe that's because I often conflate this one in my head with Claws of Axos.
Yes.
Which has a bit of a similar vibe. But I was thinking about it again. I could slot the Master into this storyline quite nicely. It would work well.
Basically, so you have this story where you've got these. Got to get this right. These. It's quite slow, but people go off to space.
It's 7 episodes, so yes, it's a bit slow.
A few episodes being a bit slow, but I like slow sometimes. But they send the spaceship up, and when it comes back down, the people in it are not the astronauts, or for a while we think they are, but they're weird. But what I like about it, it's really, and this is a bit of not a logic drop. I think this is interesting. Is that it's 3 ambassadors, aliens inside the spacesuits. And they're being, I can never work it out. Are they being made to attack people, or do they not?
I think they are. My interpretation has always been they are kind of manipulated. It's just their natural function is they have their radioactive death touch.
Yeah.
and then perhaps less aware that it is fatal to humans as such. And I get the impression they are actually the victims.
These humans
in
are
many
falling over.
respects.
If I shake their hands, they fall over.
Yeah. Oh, that often happens, doesn't it?
That's for me. That's the only bit that doesn't quite work. I really like the intrigue. I like the fact that you're not sure who to trust. I like it feels like we're watching not necessarily the Avengers, but one of those sort of shows. I kind of think what it reminds me of. Is it not? Is it like? It feels like I'm not watching Doctor Who, which is not a bad thing. Isn't there's a whole big shootout in a factory? Am I thinking of is that one?
Yeah.
Thinking of the mind of the Mind of Evil. Then I'm not sure, but these two I get muddled up.
Oh, you know, I've tried to blank the Mind of Evil. I watched that 4 years ago last, and I remember not enjoying that one as very.
I think I am getting it muddled up because a very sort of long story, but the cool thing about the Ambassadors of Death is, again, it is very Quater Mass. I didn't know much about it, so I watched this. Then I go off and watch Quater Mass 2 and go, and I like that Doctor Who can be an open door to. I've never seen any Hammer horror before, but here I am watching Talons of Wing Chang. You know what? I watched that Hammer horror and go, I've missed out on loads of really cool stuff. You know, but the thing about the Ambassador of Death again is it's a bit. Things just seem to keep happening. You get halfway through it and you go, well, you can stop now. I know people, it's a bit too long again, you know, but it's still good. But you just feel like it's got sort of pacing issues where just as you think something is solved, though there are a scary bit where someone gets left. Yes, someone gets left in a prison cell and they get lived with some food and they lift it up and it's a radioactive isotope thing. And we're just told that they died. Adult stuff. And not miserable adult stuff, because I think that was very important. You've got Jon Pertwee, who is sort of, you know, is funny and charming and everything and a bit cocky. And you've got a really good, he's a good double act with the Brigadier, and also he works really well with Liz as well. So it's not like we've got this miserable, scary horror movie without nice, fun leads that you enjoy seeing themselves save the day or be in peril. This isn't one I know very well, so I've only seen it a few times. So it is, for me, like the most un-Doctor Who-like of these.
Yeah. It's again. I see. Unlike the Silurians, where I could slot Quatermass in. I mean, this still feels to me like a Doctor Who story. It's just a darker Doctor Who story than we're used to, and we've got the Pertwee action elements there. The Doctor flies a spaceship. You know, so, couldn't have seen Hartnell doing that bit. That wouldn't have washed. The thing that kind of annoys me at the end, and I know continuing narratives are more of a modern televisual staple, but it's the whole fact that at the end the ambassadors are returned to their people. You know, the whole reason they came in the first place was establish peaceful contact with Earth, and they are never mentioned again. Earth hasn't set up the embassy with their world. We don't have peaceful coexistence with these radioactive, but to be honest, benign people. It's just, it happened. Forget about it. Move on.
Well, I like that the baddie general, I can't remember his name is now, the person he's going to live on TV, take off a space helmet and reveal that there's the alien and all its weird glowiness, which I really think is cool. I like the astronauts trapped up on space watching. They think it's a bit like one flew over the cuckoo's nest. They think they're watching some sort of football game. But when it suddenly occurred to me that if you did this now and you removed the space helmet to reveal an alien, the audience would go, oh, it's fake. It's not real.
I know. Says something about modern jaded audiences.
Yeah. And even when they did that episode of the first Christopher Eccleston series and the spaceship flew over, everybody took it really seriously. There wasn't anybody going, it's fake.
No.
You have to write that thing in of going, other than Catherine Tate's Donna, who just seemed to miss it all and not really think it was real. Everybody seems to have this genuine thing of going, well, that's aliens have arrived then, you know. So again, and here we were in contemporary Earth with again a big, huge science base, military getting in the way. Some military can be trusted, some can't. So we can trust UNIT. There is a reference, I believe, it could be in this story or Inferno, where Jon Pertwee mentions what Brigadier had done in previous episodes. He said, I hope this goes better than
That is true. There is. I can't
Yeah,
swear to it being
bitter.
this, but there is certainly a callback to
Yeah.
the events of Silurians.
Which is good. So that shows that
There is a certain continuance. I mean, there's more with the next one, but
now, I mean, we've got through 3 stories. So, Ambassadors of Death. What am I going to give it? A 10?
I'm conflicted myself. So
I'm going to give it. See, I keep saying I'm going to give it a 6, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there are bits of it I really like, but some of it sort of drags a little bit. I think,
and that's again. I mean, it's and the length plays against it.
yeah. There's a point where the spaceships are coming together like this really slowly, and they play this music, and I think they're trying to homage 2001, but it sounds like easy listening music. So maybe they couldn't get the music they wanted. It's kind of, I can't.
It probably said in the script a piece of music that sounds like 2001, The Blue Danube, but as cheap as possible for rights clearance.
But I could never understand whether that was us watching through the TVs of people watching via TV, which we failed to mention.
Don't get me started. It reminds me of in the Bond movies when you're having the spaceship stolen, and it's the. Are we supposed to be watching this through television, or is this omniscient narrator point of view? Oh, by the way, I absolutely agree with your 6. That's what I had this one down for, and not because it's unworthy, not because it's terrible, just because I think it's the poor stepchild of this season, and one that I don't think that has really more than 4 episodes of content, to be frank.
I mean, I did like the you mentioned the narrative thing. I like at the beginning we have a announcer, possibly not for BBC 3, that'll be the Demons or the Daemons.
Yeah.
You have someone with the microphone going, and here I am doing the exposition for you. So rather than the character standing around, I thought that's very clever. That's using TV. And I can't guarantee that someone would tune in and think they were really watching somebody do that. But it looks quite authentic. It feels like I'm watching a 1970s live, though possibly slightly dull thing, because years before, probably quite topical, a year before there had been the moon landing. So to see someone go, and here we are now, there's not much happening on the screen, but any minute now something might be happening. That's what happened the year before.
Yeah. So maybe that's us then looking at this with the our modern eyes. Whenever we came to it was a decade or so later. That at the time it would feel more of the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
That space landings, commentary, aliens coming from the moon like this, that was a little more of the time, when for us it's like, again, maybe we were just a little jaded to come to it. So sorry, Ambassadors of Death, maybe you haven't worn well.
I mean, so now we've got one of my their giveaway, that what mark I'm going to give this. The Inferno is amazing. You've got this again. You have all the tropes that we've had so far. You've got a big space base. You've got military people saying that. You've got scientists saying, "Don't bother me, I'm doing something like that." You've got monsters that look a bit ropey. But what you've got Jon Pertwee and I
don't know. I knew people who went to university looked just like the Primoids, so it's.
So you have this story of, for goodness sake, stop doing what you're doing. You'll cause something bad to happen, and you just think that'll probably do for the story. But no. I can't remember when it is that it happens, whether it's episode 4 or episode 3, but suddenly we get taken to a world where it's too late, where there isn't a doctor, or maybe the doctor died, I don't know. And the mad professor we're trying to stop is several steps ahead. And there's some wonderful moments where we have bits that we've already been introduced to in the early episodes being repeated or being expanded upon. Or like the bit where he's got these, we know that the bad professor touches the green slime and so he covers it up. When we go to the parallel universe,
the primordial ooze.
We see that in the Bizarro world that we go to, or the parallel world we go to, he's already got gloves on, and there's a point where Jon Pertwee says, "Take your gloves off," and I might be getting this wrong, but it's the other hand. This is so really good story writing. It's almost as if, like, whoever wrote this, I forget now, I should be saying the names, but
Don Houghton.
Yeah, that they'd seen the first 3 stories and gone, well, that's all very well. I'm going to take those elements and I'm just going to lift them %.
I couldn't agree with you more, Elliot. It is really the zenith of everything this season was about. It has 7 episodes, but it makes use of that space.
Yeah.
Far better to tell a more complex story with a strong narrative. And you're dead right. We've got the story of the environmental story of the drilling, and there's ooze coming out, and there's primoids, and we're denying these things are happening. Yeah, we've had that. We had that in the Silurians with science versus modernization. We kind of had it with Ambassadors of Death, with trying to cover things up with officialdom. We have that. And then we go and see what happens in the parallel universe, where we're a little ahead of the game, where all the bad things the Doctor said could happen are happening, and all the more so. And it kind of gives us, for once, a chance for them to really go into sort of disaster narrative without having to find a way to run it back. Because they look, it's going to go out. The Earth's going to go boom.
One of the best bits, I think it's at the end of episode 5, where we're in the parallel universe. Everything's gone completely to hell. There's lava everywhere. We're inside the warehouse. They've got the slightly broken down TARDIS that might not work. And there's a point where the brigade leader, who is a cowardly version of the brigadier, is completely losing it. And he's pointing his gun at the Doctor, and the Doctor, no one's going to be saved other than the Doctor. But he's got to get back home to save his version of reality. That's really dark. And the moment that you see the lava come along and the scream and everything, you don't know if the Doctor's going to make it to episode 6 because we don't yet. Tune in next week. It's a brilliant.
No, I mean, there's, like I say, there are so many points about the aesthetic of this storyline to pick on as well. You say the TARDIS console outside the TARDIS. Yeah, that's the first.
And isn't it green?
The brigade leader with his fabulous eye patch. Section leader Shaw as well. Caroline Johns has a fabulous time playing that role.
Yeah. I remember at the beginning, it feels as if we're going to be slightly light-hearted because there's a really fun opening sequence in episode 1 where the Doctor is driving along. You see I'm going to probably get the order wrong. There's somebody whistling a tune, there's an opera, and then Jon Pertwee is driving, and he's going, da, 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 da. He's doing the same song as the person is whistling, I think. And you have these lovely shots, and you've got a lightheartedness, which will be a complete parallel of where we are going. There's also a lovely bit where we keep jumping from universe to universe. So there's a point where the Doctor gets put in jail. I think it's in the parallel universe, and right next to him is someone who's turning into a primoid. And you just think, well, how are we going to cut away? Well, why would we cut away? Boom, we're going to cut back to our reality and see how they're getting on. No, don't. I want to see how Jon Pertwee getting on.
But that's good. But that makes the point. I mean, it gives us the ticking clock that while we're not just focused on the parallel universe and all the terrible things that are happening, things are still happening in the prime universe. They're still happening. They're still progressing. And the Doctor is absent. And we've already seen in the parallel universe the bad things that happen because the Doctor is absent from that universe for whatever reasons. Right. So the fact that it's still progressing, you've got that, not just the tension of can the Doctor get away from the parallel universe now these things are happening. Can he get back in time? And if he gets back in time, will he have the ability to actually stop what is happening? Because things then will have moved on further than they were when he left. So,
and also it makes us care about the characters. The people in the lab, I can't remember their name. There's a woman and a man. Got their names now. There's those two. We care what happens to them. So when we see the parallel universe versions of them, they're not going to survive. Yeah, that breaks your heart. It does for me at least. Yeah. And then so we're going, will they be all right in our world?
It's a key thing, and I think many modern television and filmmakers don't often pay attention to it. That whole idea of killing faceless CGI people by the hundreds means nothing. Yeah. Killing one person whose backstory we understand, who we appreciate, who we know a little about their life, what they do, hits so much harder.
Yeah,
as narratively speaking, and I think this does well. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we've touched on things like the primoids do look a bit crap. There's no denying that. It's Hairy Monkey Man. I've turned into Hairy Monkey Man, but
even though the effects are a bit ropey, there's a point where we see we've got to mention. We did forget to mention someone who will be more important later. Unit soldier. What's his name? The famous guy. The one who
the famous guy.
We'll get it in a minute. Sergeant Benton.
Benton, you mean? Yeah.
We are slowly being introduced to Benton. I don't think he's in Spearhead from Space. But he's in this, and he's, he gets a bit to do. But there's a really sad bit where we see the version of him, even though the version of him in the parallel universe is as much nasty, he gets turned into a Primoid, and you see him literally, he's like doing Jekyll and Hyde. He looks scared, he looks terrified, it's happening to him. And then when we go outside, and all the heat's been turned up, and it's really, for me, it's really unsettling. It reminds me of Quatermass, that bit where in London, where everybody goes crazy in Quatermass in the pit, where everything is lost, and we are on that parallel universe, and it's all, that they've done something to the camera, so it's all kind of glowing. And and also the Primords look different in our universe than they do in there's a more advanced. They're doing this weird thing like this, and they look different.
I'm a radar actor, doing this again. This is my best monster.
I don't know. I like the fact that it's almost as if whatever's inside them doesn't quite know how to hold a human body together, so it's fighting against it or something.
I always assumed it's because they kind of their musculoskeletal system had kind of regressed to an earlier configuration that was less adapted to modern life. But
I think we can have both.
Pure speculation.
Yours did too. Yes, but again, I'm just trying to think before we just say how brilliant Inferno is. I'm trying to think.
I think we've been saying that for the last 5 minutes easily.
Is anything that, not a bad thing, but anything we've left out? Because I'm just trying to think. I like the narrative. I like the scariness. I like the fact there's a point where they use those big, what they call those gas chamber things to climb over.
Yeah.
So you've got a bit, and then there's a point where Jon Pertwee.
It's one of those that I look at and I think they'd never allowed them to film in that location today.
Right.
Come film at an industrial chemical works. Yeah. You'll be quite safe.
Yes. Every time I drive past one, I'm just thinking, or walk past one and going, Jon Pertwee should be climbing on that.
I drove through the Immingham business factory area earlier this year, and it just looks like the set of Inferno for miles. It really does.
So, I mean, obviously, it goes without saying, are we both going to give it 10?
No.
Right.
I'm giving it a 9 because, as I say, that I can't get past that. I think the Primoid design lets us down. I would have liked a little more with that. And I'm sorry, killing, the Stahlman at the end with a fire extinguisher. Oh, because they can only be killed by extreme cold.
Yeah, it's okay. No, I'd forgotten about that.
But
yeah,
I would give it 9.5 if I could. I mean, I'm not sure a whole mark off just for those elements. It's absolute stone cold classic. It's a fantastic end to the season.
Yeah.
It, as we say, brings all those elements that makes Pertwee's era good together, and deservedly, it's one of the best episodes of the classic story of the classic era. Full stop.
It is like, you reminded me. It is a bit like a zombie movie by the end. All I hear and don't let them touch you, and they're closing in and all that sort of stuff. That for me, despite the effects being ropey, I give it a 10 because of that. But then we have this sad bit for me, is I know that Doctor Who will not be like this ever again, because when we come back, nothing wrong with, Joe Grant and the Master and the Unit family, but we only have had these 4 stories where Doctor Who is being told in this way, and it doesn't come back. Though I think Big Finish have done a few sort of bits and pieces, and I know a few people who have done audios in that style, and it's quite nice for me. It's like I always wanted there to be more season 18 of Tom Baker with lots of science happening to him. I like that. There should have been more of that sort of thing. But what can you say about the first season of Jon Pertwee? I didn't look up the ratings, but I think he did twice as much, did really, really well, better than Patrick Troughton. Because the series in the late 60s had gone a bit like, it was still good, but it wasn't being watched as by many. And this, suddenly, boom, Doctor Who is popular again,
Yeah. No, I mean, it's as I said, we said at the start. I mean, the series as a whole, there's a statement here that this is not your father's Doctor Who anymore. We've been going since 63.
Yeah.
We're having a bit of a phase change. We've got supporting cast for the first time ever beyond the companions, as you say, with bringing in Benton, bringing in the rest of Unit, even if some of them are just Soldier 5 dying for the 7th time. But it's a supporting cast and a very different scenario. It's no longer traveling from planet to planet with each time waving. Thank you, Doctor, for saving us again. We will live in peace from this time forward, which was kind of the sign-off of so many of the Doctors 1 and 2. Now Doctors living in the world and things go on. I described this when I was thinking about it in my notes. This is a regeneration of the show. It's the first real regeneration of the show as a whole.
Yeah, and also he has a car.
Bessie. Now, you see, my wife loathed Bessie with a vengeance. She thinks it's one of the things of Pertwee's era she thinks just does not fly. I like Bessie, but I try not to argue with her on it. So.
It's a bit, it's interesting because it's that mishmash, as you were mentioning, the Avengers, which is that sort of eccentric British
whimsy.
Where you've got this sort of modern
it's postmodern sci-fi whimsy. Come on, that's what Bessie.
But it doesn't bring it down. I think what's interesting about it is because you have quite a serious season, but he's still got a fun roadster. But it's not wacky for me. It's the same way that you can watch the Avengers with Steed, and he'll have a bowler hat, but and it will be quite stylized, but it's still quite serious.
I think absolutely. I think my one disappointment about this is, this is the only season we get with Liz, and for whatever reason she departed. I would have liked another story, maybe a transitional one with maybe her and Joe. That would have been superb.
Well, the next time she shows up is the 5 Doctors.
And let's not mention her appearance in Dimensions in Time.
Oh, well, maybe we'll review that sometime.
Let's just not mention. No, let's just not mention Dimensions in Time. I rewatched that last year, and I don't know why I put myself through it. Oh, I do. It's because my wife had never seen it. So I put it on, and afterwards she says, please don't show it to me again.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Like Doctor Who always changes and develops, whether in the right direction or not.
Exactly.
1970, they made the right choice in so many things.
Absolutely. There's a reason why there's the Pertwee aesthetic, I think, is unique.
Yeah.
Throughout pretty much all his seasons. I mean, his last season is a bit more traditional Doctor Who, but for the first 3 seasons of him, very, very different show, but one that plays to the lead actor's strengths and tells us a nice, coherent sort of series of stories. I don't know. I love the Pertwee era. I'm sorry, I can't say any bit fairer than that. So.
Well, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what we do next. I think it'd be quite nice to sort of review a different era. It doesn't have to be season 22, but I think it'd be quite nice to pick something we don't necessarily like.
Do we want to go back to New Who even?
I'm quite happy with classic. I think.
Okay, we'll go with classic. I think at some point we should do Tennant's first season again. That would be quite fun to talk about. But let's go. Okay, shall we go more modern? Shall we go for some Peter?
Oh, Peter Davison, why not? That'd be quite good. Yes.
Because Peter's era, you see, is the first era I watched all of on broadcast. Latter half of Tom, I certainly saw on broadcast, but I didn't see Tom from the very beginning. So I always think Peter, for me, is the first Doctor I got to experience all of his era.
Yeah.
We'll have
three.
Let's pick one of Peter's seasons to go with.
But we won't say what it is. Tune in next time to see which of the 3 we pick. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you for listening, folks.